Hello, once again, and welcome to another chapter of Fundamentals of Accounting and Business. So, last week I already discussed with you, and for the previous weeks, I have discussed how to record and how to summarize transactions, accounting transactions, or economic transactions in a general journal, general ledger, and trial balance. I also give you an idea on how to prepare income statement. So before we further proceed to the different financial statement, I want you to know first how to adjust transactions every end of the period. Okay, so that will be the topic that we will be discussing today. So let's begin. For our chapter 11, the business transactions of a service firm, part 2, again about adjusting entries. First, what is adjusting and why we are preparing it? So these are the coverage that we will discuss here. Adjusting entries, the adjusted trial balance, and of course the worksheet preparation, including our income statement, balance sheet, closing entries, and post-closing trial balance. Aside from the two financial statements given here, because this is the only these are the only financial statement included in the worksheet preparation. But if we are going to prepare a detailed financial statement, we need to have the four that I have mentioned before. The income statement, statement of changes in equity, statement of cash flow, and of course, the last one, the balance sheet or the statement of financial position. Okay, so again, adjusting entries. So we are doing adjusting entries in case that there are amounts, irrelevant amounts reflected on the general journal, or there are some instances that an account has expired or unexpired or even earned and incurred. Okay, so these changes in the accounting records must be reflected and considered as well. So that's why we record all necessary adjustments in our journal. Okay, again, just like the journal entry, we will journalize as well the different adjusting entries that we possibly encounter at the end of accounting period. Again, we are preparing adjusting entries every end of the period. So what are the different classifications and characteristics of adjusting? So first, we have depreciation. Second, we have bad debts. Third, we have prepaid expenses. For a while, I will just um, have an arrow, a laser pointer. Okay. Prepaid expenses, accrued expenses, deferred revenues, and accrued revenues. For the characteristics of adjusting, we have this. First, each entry is recorded at the end of an accounting period. Again, every end of the accounting period. Each entry has at least one balance sheet account and at least one income statement account. Okay, so I already gave you a tip on the components of the income statement from the trial balance and the components of the balance sheet, again from the trial balance. So I know you already have idea what this sentence is all about. One one account for balance sheet and one account for income statement. And lastly, each entry has no cash account in either the debit or the credit side because we are now adjusting our necessary accounts again that has expired, incurred, okay, or whatsoever. All right, now let's proceed to the first adjusting or account that can be adjusted. So depreciation, it is applied to the components of property, plant, and equipment. If you would remember, I have given you your previous assignment regarding the different PPEs around your home. your equipments, your furnitures, your house and lot, and etc. So those properties, those plant and equipment have necessary value from time to time. Meaning, the value of that particular asset when you acquire them is no longer the same after such period of time. Okay? So these are the assets held by the business organization for long-term purposes, and these are beneficial as the business may increase its revenue but requires an expense recognition. Of course, if napakinabangan or if we use that asset to earn revenue, of course, we cannot earn without uh, properly using that particular asset. And if we use that asset, of course, nagde-depreciate na siya. Nababawasan na yung value niya kasi yung pagkabago niya, dahil nalutuan mo na siya or nagamit mo na siya for business, nawawala na siya. Kumbaga, nababawasan na yung halaga or yung value niya. And of course, according to the statement, when there is gain, there is also pain. So in business, you cannot just gain, but there are times that we experience pain. So it is normal. So for those who are planning to do business or who are trying to enter business or those who are into the business side already, so always remember that there will always be pain. So it is impossible if you can't experience pain because this is where we learn, okay? When we experience pain. So again, depreciation is an account that we can use if we depreciate or we less the value of the asset. Okay? Next. So how do we record depreciation? So based on this entry, dapat meron tayong debit na depreciation expense and credit accumulated depreciation. Okay? Depreciation expense is an income statement account. Ito yung tinatawag natin kanina. Ito yung sinasabi natin kanina na dapat each of the entries in either debit or credit must have at least one income statement or balance sheet account. So for this time, since we already have income statement account here, of course, our credit is or should be a balance sheet account. So accumulated depreciation is a balance sheet account. Excuse me. So, ma'am, what is accumulated depreciation? So, since we incurred an expense at the end of the accounting period, of course, we need to record a deduction from PPE account because the value on the asset side is still the same unless we acknowledge the depreciation. So, the depreciation there is called accumulated depreciation. And kung mapapansin natin, bakit po nakasama siya sa asset? Kung siya pala ay deduction dun sa asset. Kaya nga po siya naka-credit is because contra account siya ng particular PPE. So kung halimbawa, bumili tayo ng ref ngayon, nagkakahalaga ng 100,000 at yung ref natin na yan, nagamit na natin for 2 years, yung halaga niya nabawasan ng 10, sabi natin 10,000 for 2 years, nabawasan yung value niya. So, magiging 90,000 na lang. So, para maging 90,000 si ref, kailangan merong naka-credit na 10,000 sa kanya. Okay? So, kung ang value ni asset, again, original value niya ay 100K, may contra account siya na accumulated depreciation na 10,000 pesos. Meaning, nabawasan na yung value ni asset from that period. Okay? Kaya siya contra account. Lahat ng contra account under the asset side ay of course nasa credit ang kanyang punta. Okay? So depreciation expense is something that we should compute. Of course, how can we determine the value of that depreciation kung hindi po natin siya kukumputin? So this is the formula in computing the depreciation expense for a particular PPE. Reminder, only PPE lang po ang nagde-depreciate ha. Yung ating mga office supplies na consumable naman siya within 1 year and all the other supplies na kaya mong i-consume within a year, so hindi siya part ng PPE or hindi siya nagde-depreciate. Okay? Ang nagde-depreciate lang lahat na may long-term use. Okay? So now, this is the formula in computing the depreciation expense. Of course, the cost of the PPE, magkano ba si PPE? That is the 100,000 pesos, the refrigerator. Less the estimated residual value. So when we say residual value, it is the amount that is expected to be recovered from the asset at the end of useful life. May mapapakinabangan pa rin sa kanya. So halimbawa nga si ref, ang useful life niya hanggang 10 years lang, pero after 10 years, meron pa rin siyang mapapakinabangan sa kanya, di ba? So, yun. Yun yung residual value natin. And of course, it should be divided to the estimated useful life. So, usually, kapag mga mabibigat na assets, like ref, television, so usually yan ay tumatagal ng 5 to 10 years. Especially yung mga furniture and fixtures din, lalo na ko yung kahoy na gamit ay nara, yung mga matitibay na kahoy, no? So good for 10 years. Yan, more than 10 years pa nga. Pero ang estimated lang natin, at least 10 years lang natin siya magagamit. Yung mga 5 years naman na PPE, pupwede yan yung maliliit na equipment, like yung mga kettle, oven, no, yan, mga 5 years lang ang estimated niyan, 3 to 5 years. Pero, may kasama kasi sa PPE na hindi nagde-depreciate. Ano po yun? Yun ay ang land. Kasi ang land, hindi kagaya ng ibang asset natin, ang land kasi ay habang tumatagal, tumataas yung value niya. Yung ibang PPE natin, kagaya nga ng furniture, ng ref, no? Habang tumatagal, bumababa yung value niya. Kasi may mga bago na sa market, or di kaya nagasgasan na siya and all. So, may mga changes na doon. Hindi sa nagde-depreciate yung mga ganong asset, pero ang land, hindi po. Okay? So, this is straight line method. So, you need to compute first. Before you provide an entry for depreciation, you need to compute first how much is the required depreciation for that particular period. Okay? You need all these data. Okay? Now, let's proceed to the next one. Oh, before we proceed to the next adjusting entry or adjusted account or an account to be adjusted, I will give you an activity regarding the depreciation that you prepared, or the PPE rather, that you prepared last chapter 7 and 8, and you need to provide a depreciation cost for that. Okay? How about the residual value, ma'am? For academic purposes, it is always given. But since you have your assets with you, tanungin sa mga parents natin, pagtatapos kaya yung useful life na to, mga magkano kaya yung value niya? Kung i-junk mo na siya, of course, nasa 10 to 100 pesos. Mahal na nga yung 1K pag nasa junk shop yung value niya. Pang junk shop yung value niya. Okay, so the deadline for this is on March 1, 2022. Now, next. Next one is about bad debts. Ang bad debts po, ito yung mga receivables natin from the customer which happened na hindi na possible or possible na hindi na mabayaran ng customer. Again, these are our receivables na possible na hindi na nila mabayaran. Okay? So this is an application of conservatism principle of accounting, which when applied to assets will imply that overstatement of assets is undesirable. This concept is applied to the accounts receivable of of a firm when a customer would not be able to pay their dues. In case nga na hindi mabayaran, so halimbawa, may nangutang sa'yo, na-aksidente siya, eh 50-50 na siya. So, hindi naman natin ginugusto yun, no? Pero that is one of the example. So, syempre, yung utang niya sa'yo, malabo nang mabayaran. So, that is a bad debt. Okay? So, how are you going to estimate a bad debt? If you are an accountant and you can't determine the value of possible receivables that you will no longer receive, so we will just multiply the amount of accounts receivable to the estimated percentage of that particular debts or bad debts. Okay? Example. So this is the example of an entry using bad debts account. Of course, if it is possible that a receivable will no longer be received, so of course, magiging expense na natin siya. Kasi hindi na natin siya matatanggap eh. Diba? Magiging expense na natin yon. So we will debit bad debts expense and credit allowance for doubtful accounts. Again, ma'am, para saan ba yung allowance for doubtful accounts? So naglalagay lang tayo ng allowance for doubtful accounts for those accounts, for the accounts receivable account para mabawasan din yung value niya sa balance sheet. Okay? Kasi nga kung ang value ni accounts receivable ay 5,000 pesos, tapos may 1,000 na expense na siya kasi possible na siyang hindi ma-receive or talagang napatunayan natin hindi na siya ma-receive, so automatic sa balance sheet account, magbabawas tayo. Okay? Magpo-provide tayo ng allowance for that. Naka-contra account din siya, kaya laging naka-credit. Okay? Allowance for doubtful accounts is a deduction from accounts receivable, and the difference is called net realizable value. Okay? So this is one of the best example for that. Please take note of this, okay? Please take note. For example, there is a 1 million peso accounts receivable at the end of the year. And it is determined that 5% of these receivables could be uncollectible. Kapag could be, ibig sabihin, possible pa lang, hindi ka sure na makokollect siya, ang adjusting entry natin ay ito. Debit natin yung allowance for doubtful accounts and credit accounts receivable. Okay? When later on, okay. For a while. Aha. Okay, for a while. All right. So the entry should be not this way. It should be bad debts expense because this is could be, meaning possible pa lang, hindi pa natin napapatunayang uncollectible siya. Mali yung entry ha. Ang entry dapat dito ay, baguhin na lang natin. Oops. Ay, ano ba yan? Okay, for a while, baguhin natin yan. Okay. Oops. Our slide is not responding, so let's just wait for a while. Again, if that's the case, if the bad debts is, if you are unsure na hindi talaga marireceive yung account, hindi pa tayo sigurado na talagang hindi siya marireceive, unsure ka pa lang. So, dapat ang entry dito ay bad debts expense, could be uncollectible, and allowance for doubtful accounts. Pwede rin itong tawaging allowance for bad debts, ha? Not just for doubtful accounts. Doubtful kasi nga, possible pa lang na hindi makolektan. Maglalagay tayo ng allowance for that. Ngayon, when later on, it is proved to be uncollectible, when later on it is proved to be uncollectible, it is simply written off. Let's say an amount of 20,000 will no longer be collected. So the entry is simply, of course, kapag hindi na talaga makokolekta yung account, ibabawas na natin siya dun sa allowance for doubtful. Kasi napatunayan na natin, hindi na siya doubtful. Napatunayan na hindi marireceive, so ibabawas natin dun sa allowance natin sa doubtful accounts. At ibabawas din natin sa amount ng accounts receivable. Okay? So, ayun. Again, the first thing to record, how much is the expense for bad debts? The possible expense for that. So, out of 50,000, napatunayan na yung 20,000 doon hindi makokolekta. So, meaning yung balance na 30,000, doubtful pa rin siya. Kasi 20,000 lang naman yung nabayaran. Okay? Yung siguradong hindi mababayaran. However, in the next accounting period, for instance, the ending balance of accounts receivable is 1,500,000. If the estimated doubtful accounts of 5% is still valid, it will be multiplied to accounts receivable to get 75,000. So 1.5 million times 5%, this is 75,000. And since there is already an existing 30,000, so maliban sa 75,000, merong existing na doubtful account na 30,000 pesos. Okay? Only the deficiency of 45,000 is recorded as bad debts expense. Why? Again, continuous kasi yung recording natin. So, from 1 million, nagkaroon ka ng 1.5 million na doubtful accounts or ng accounts receivable rather. Na accounts receivable. Eh, di ba kanina, nung 1 million yung accounts receivable natin, may 30,000 pesos na tayong accounts balance, no, sa bad debts natin, yung natitirang balance for bad debts. Eh, at the end of the next accounting period, 75 yung total niya. So, 75 minus 30, ang deficiency na lang na kailangan mo i-record ay yung natitira na 45,000. Okay? Next. Prepaid expenses. So we have encountered this a lot of times during our previous transactions, no? Pag prepaid expenses, again, ito yung mga expenses na ginagamit, na binabayaran mo muna bago mo gamitin. So for example nga nito yung mga supplies, no? Yung mga supplies natin, bumibili muna tayo, so prepaid siya, tsaka lang natin ginagamit kapag kailangan. Pag kailangan na natin at nagamit na natin, hindi na siya asset, expense na siya. So, yun yung mga prepaid expenses. Another example of this are rent. So, halimbawa, nagbayad ka ng 2 months advance, 1 month deposit na rent. So, lahat yun ay for advance. That is prepaid. Now, kapag nagamit mo na lahat nung pinondo mo sa pagrerenta mo ng isang building, so, hindi na siya prepaid expense. Considered na siya as a real expense. Ano po ba pinagkaiba na prepaid sa real? Again, pag prepaid, parang mga card na binibili mo muna yung card pero hindi mo pa naman ginagamit. Kaya nasa asset pa rin siya. Kasi hindi pa natin siya napapakinabangan. Pag napakinabangan mo na siya, tsaka siya pupunta sa actual expenses. Okay? And then, when cash is paid, the cash account is credited to indicate the outflow of cash, while prepaid account is debited for the same amount. Okay? Ayan. Prepaid expense and cash. When the prepaid expense has already expired. So, kung baga kanina, bumili tayo ng prepaid card pang load. Hindi pa naman natin kailangan ng 100 pesos na load na card na yon. So, ang treatment sa kanya, dahil bumili ka ng card, of course, prepaid expense siya and then cash. Now, kapag in-adjust natin siya, kasi yung card, nagamit mo na within the period, so i-adjust natin siya sa accounting period natin. So, therefore, meron na tayong i-record na expense at mababawasan na yung prepaid expenses mo kasi na-consume mo na siya, nagamit mo na siya. Alright? Isa pa to, medyo thrilling ito, yung accrued expenses natin. There are expenses when incurrence comes before the actual disbursement. So, gamit muna bago bayad. Kanina sa prepaid expense, bayad muna bago natin gagamitin. Ngayon, pag accrued expenses naman, ginamit na natin bago natin bayaran. A perfect example is electricity and water. Of course. Kasi ang electricity at water, ginagamit muna natin. Tapos after nun, may marireceive tayong bill. Magkano yung total na nagamit natin. Okay? The actual bill for utilities comes from the month end or any other period for that matter. Okay? An expense should be recorded although there is no actual outlay of cash. So, ang entry natin, kapag nag-inquire tayo ng expense pero hindi pa natin nababayaran, halimbawa, nag-bill si Umeco. So, di mo pa nababayaran. Utilities expense yon and accrued expenses payable. Kapag i-adjust natin siya. Pero kapag on time, real time sa transaction siya lumabas, so hindi siya accrued expense payable. Siya dapat ay accounts payable. Pero since this has happened or all adjusting happened every end of the period, either monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, or annually, so ayun po siya. Okay? Now, paano ba siya ini-entry? Expense ang debit, let's say bad debts, the particular asset that had incurred expense, okay, and credit accrued expense payable. So for example, here the electricity, debit utilities expense and credit accrued expenses payable. Again, this happens every end of the period. Next. Unearned revenue. So, unearned revenue is a liability that you failed to comply. Ibig pong sabihin, nagbayad na siya sa'yo, pero may utang ka sa kanyang services mo. Kaya siya unearned service revenue. Nakatanggap ka ng partial payment or ng advance payment, tapos yung natitira ay unearned na siya. Okay? Next. As the period covered by the cash receipt expires or the required services have already been rendered, such revenue is deemed earned rather than unearned. Okay? Again, kapag nag-expire na yung na-receive nating cash at naibigay mo na yung service mo kay client, of course, ibabawas na natin siya dun sa unearned. Gagawin na natin siyang service revenue. Ulitin ko lang po, ginagawa natin yung unearned service revenue if in case na may nag-advance payment sa atin, pero hindi pa natin nagagawa yung service natin sa kanya or hindi pa natin naibibigay yung product natin sa kanya. Okay? So, ayan. Accrued revenue, the last one for this topic, accrued revenue. Kapag sinabi mo namang accrued revenue, opposite siya ng unearned. Okay? Instead of receiving cash in advance, it is received after services are completely rendered. So para ka lang nag-record ng pautang, no? Para ka lang nag-record ng pautang or para ka lang nag-record ng services na na-render mo na wala pang bayad. Okay? Nagbigay ka ng service pero wala pang bayad. Yun yung accrued revenue. Kabaliktaran siya ng unearned. Kasi sa unearned, binayaran ka muna bago ka nag-render. Sa accrued, na-render mo na pero hindi pa bayad. Okay? That's it. Now, once you're done encoding all the possible adjustments on the financial statements every end of the month or at the end of the month, we are now going to prepare trial balance, adjusted trial balance. How are we going to do that? Okay, so nasa income statements na tayo. So kapag adjusted trial balance, parang trial balance lang din natin before. Okay, yung ginawa natin previously, pero magkakaroon ng mga additional accounts yan kasi nga nag-update tayo. Okay, magkakaroon siya ng iba't ibang accounts na bago dahil nga nag-adjust tayo. Alright? Yan. So, kailangan balance pa rin yan. Hindi siya forced balance ha. Kailangan balance pa rin. To check if we are now capable of doing financial statements. Kasi kapag walang adjusted trial balance, mahihirapan ng accountant to know where the funds go. So, kung saan na napunta yung mga funds nila. Okay? Again, adjusted trial balance and financial income statements. Now, let's proceed to the income statement first, okay? Name of the company, income statement for the period ended December 31, 2020. So, nilagay ko yung period kasi again, meron nga 4 na klaseng period. Monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, and annually. So, at our case, we decided to use monthly. Okay? Monthly lang siya para hindi kayo masyadong mahirapan. So, the format again, the service revenue, ma-minus natin sa expenses. So, yun yung gross profit natin. Yung other gains and losses natin, kung tayo man ay we are not doing well in business, so yun ang i-record natin dito. And of course, the total of all of this is so-called net income. Net income na po ang tawag sa kanya. Okay? Now, next. Balance sheet or otherwise known as the statement of financial position. Okay? Again, just like what I've said, illustrating it last week for the components of the balance sheet from the trial balance, again, the assets, liabilities, and others equity, but make sure to do first the others balance sheet account. The other statement, financial statements. Before we proceed to this, dapat kasi alam nyo muna yung statement of changes in statement of changes in equity. Yun yung sa capital natin. So kung meron tayong owner's capital, no, magkano kaya ang owner's capital natin na na-record dun sa adjusted trial balance? Okay, kung meron tayong net loss sa income statement, i-add natin yon. Okay? Or ima-minus natin, plus minus yon. Yung net loss natin. Yung owner's drawings from adjusted trial balance, kapag may mga winidraw si employee natin, no? Or kaya ikaw for your own personal use, so yan. And of course, the total amount of capital. Alright, so yan. Next is the cash flow. Oh, may cash flow pa tayo. Again, yung cash flow natin galing sa financing, investing, and operating activities. Ang operating, lahat na may kinalaman doon sa operations ninyo. Kung halimbawa kayo ay swimming area, or ang business ninyo ay pool, of course, yung paggamit ng tubig sa pool is an operating expense. Pero kung kayo ay simpleng tindahan lang na ginagamit natin yung kung halimbawa simpleng tindahan ka lang, maliit lang, no? Kung ano man yung kinita mo doon, kung ano man yung na-withdraw mo doon, i-minus natin yan sa total capital. Okay? So, para makuha natin kung magkano na lang ba yung balance ng capital at the end of this December 31, 2020. Ay, asan ba ako? We are talking about cash flow pala, no? Sa cash flow natin, ang components niya again ay financing, investing, and operating. Kapag operating, kung ano yung ginagamit mo sa transaction mo. Kung ikaw ay maliit na business lang, tapos yung tubig, hindi naman o kumbaga wala siyang kinalaman sa pagbenta mo ng produkto mo, so hindi siya operating. Pero kung kagaya nga ng resort na gumagamit kayo ng pool, yun talaga yung main business nyo, so operating activity siya. So doon natin ilalagay yun sa cash flow. Again, cash flow from investing activities, cash flow from financing activities, and cash flow from operating activities. Yung investing activities naman, yun yung mga nilabas or pinasok nating pera sa lahat ng mga ininvest natin. Kagaya nga ng capital or kaya nag-ambag ka ng kotse mo, yung personal car mo, nilagay mo sa business, nasa investing yan. Okay? Sa financial naman, sa financing activities naman, yan yung mga hiniram mong pera, no, yung mga borrowed money natin. So, doon yan siya papasok. Okay? Kapag nag-combine at na-minus natin silang lahat, dapat ang maging total niya ay same doon sa ledger ng ating cash. Okay? Parehas sa ledger ng ating cash. Kaya nga nilagyan ko na explanation yun, di ba? Pinalagyan ko sa inyo na explanation para madali nyo ma-identify kung financing, investing, or operating ba siya. Okay? And once we're done doing that, natapos na tayo mag-adjust, di ba? Kumbaga from the very beginning, una ang ginawa natin, nag-record tayo sa general journal. Nag-summarize tayo ng bawat account title sa general ledger. Nag-summarize tayo ng lahat ng accounting titles sa trial balance. Nakagawa na rin tayo ng adjusting entries. Gagawa din tayo ng adjusted trial balance. Again, same lang sa content ng trial balance before. Magdadagdag lang tayo ng mga nadagdag na adjusted accounts. Okay? And after that, the preparation of the financial statements, income statement, tapos yung cash flow, changes in equity, and then the statement of financial position. Huling-huli po yun ginagawa. Okay? Huling-huli siya ginagawa. Now, after nun, magko-close na tayo ng book natin. So, kunwari, ang reporting natin ay every quarter or every semi-annual ba yan? So, nagko-close tayo ng libro natin. At kadalasan, ang mga kino-close na accounts to zero are those na may kinalaman sa revenue account, sa expenses accounts, capital, and withdrawal. So, lahat ng halos component ng income statement, sinasara natin yan. So, bakit po sinasara? Kasi the following period, iba naman yung series ng ibebenta mo. Okay? So, para may kumbaga, fresh yung pag-start natin ng business, no? So, ganun siya. Nagko-close tayo ng libro. Okay? So, paano i-close kapag revenue account? Kapag revenue account ang close natin, of course, babawasan na natin si revenue. Debit na natin si revenue, credit na ang income summary account. Ganon din si expenses, no? Since debit ang nature ng expenses natin, kapag nag-close tayo, napupunta na siya sa credit side. So, ang debit natin doon ay income summary at minus natin yung expenses. Okay? Once we're done with that, we can consider the owner's capital. Okay? Kung wala na namang nagbago sa capital niya, hindi naman uh, invest again, no? So, owner's drawing agad ang bagsak niya. Ilaless na natin yung ating withdrawal eh, di ba? Iko-close na natin siya kasi next month may panibagong withdrawals na naman yan. And of course, debit the owner's capital para aware siya na merong drawing account. Okay, income summary for the owner's capital. So kapag owner's capital na yung affected, kapag owner's account na natin yung affected natin, so since it, no. Ang income summary pala muna yung i-close natin. Okay, kanina nakapag-close na ng revenue, ng expense, ng capital. Now, yung income summary naman. So, bibigyan ko kayo ng tip. Okay? Kung magkano yung na-compute nyo sa inyong income statement na net profit or net income, it should also be reflected here. Pag kinompute kasi natin itong debit ng transactions na to, pag kinompute natin yung income summary na yan, ilan ba yung income summary natin dito na i-reverse din natin? Kasi ang original principal dito, lagi siyang nakakredit. Para siyang treated nga as revenue. Lagi siyang nakakredit. Okay? Dinedebit lang natin siya kagaya na to every time na may nababawas doon sa expenses natin. So, yun siya. Okay? So, dapat kapag yung revenue minus mo yung expense and drawings, yun dapat din yung magiging sagot natin dito. Okay? At kapag yung owner's capital naman, close natin siya kasi possible na magdagdag ka ng panibagong capital next year. Okay? Pag nag-close tayo ng owner's capital account, ang credit natin ay income summary account. And later, you will see the difference on how we close entries. Alright? And lastly, since nakagawa na tayo ng journal, nakapag-summarize sa ledger, nakapag-summarize sa trial balance, since nakapag-journalize ka na ng adjustments, gagawa ka ngayon ng adjusted trial balance, okay? After nun, financial statements, closing entries, and the last part of preparing your financial report and communicate it with your external users, we do post-closing trial balance. Pero mas konti na siya. Mas konti na siya compare doon sa adjusted at yung normal trial balance natin. Bakit po? Kasi nag-close na tayo ng mga accounts, 'di ba? So since nag-close na tayo ng mga accounts, ano yung nagbago doon? Kaya nga siya post-closing. After nung naging transactions, ano yung nagbago? Okay? All right, so I think that ends my discussion for today. So we will try to answer an activity next meeting, but please submit first your classwork on time because we will check activities. If you can't comply before the deadline, I'm so sorry, I will no longer accept your paper. Okay? All right, so see you again next week. Have a great day and happy learning.